You feel it every time you're about to do something bold, something authentic, something that expresses your real power. That voice in your head that whispers you're being selfish, you're being arrogant, you're being too much. Who do you think you are? You have an idea that excites you, a vision that could transform everything. But before you even begin, the guilt arrives. Shouldn't you be more humble? Shouldn't you consider how others will feel? Shouldn't you make yourself smaller so you don't threaten anyone? Don't outshine anyone. Don't make anyone uncomfortable with your ambition or talent or intensity. And so you pull back, you dim your light, you apologize for taking up space. You edit yourself into something more palatable, more acceptable, more safe. This happens constantly, doesn't it? You're in a meeting and you have the best idea, but you don't voice it with full conviction because that would seem arrogant. You have a gift, a talent, something you're genuinely exceptional at, but you downplay it because celebrating your excellence feels like bragging. You want to pursue something ambitious, something that would require you to operate at your full capacity, but you hesitate because striving for greatness seems selfish when there are people struggling just to survive. You've learned to see your own strength as something suspect, something that needs to be constrained, something that should be hidden or diminished or apologized for, and you call this being a good person, being moral, being humble. But underneath the performance of virtue, you're suffocating, you're dying, you're watching your potential rot because you've internalized the message that your power is dangerous and needs to be controlled. And here's what makes it unbearable. Everyone around you reinforces this imprisonment. When you do express authentic strength, when you do pursue something ambitious, when you do operate at your full capacity without apology, people respond with subtle or not so subtle hostility. They call you selfish, arrogant, self-centered. They remind you to stay humble, to remember where you came from, to not get too big for your britches. They praise you when you make yourself small and criticize you when you expand into your actual power. And slowly, methodically, you learn that the price of acceptance is the suppression of your strength. You learn that to be loved means to be weak. To be approved of means to be diminished. To be good means to betray everything powerful within you. You're not imagining this, and you're not being paranoid. Thousands of people right now who possess genuine strength, real capacity for greatness, authentic power, are experiencing exactly this same systematic suppression. What you're experiencing was identified with brutal clarity by Friedrich Nietzsche, who spent his entire life examining how morality functions, not as a guide to goodness, but as a weapon used by the weak to control and diminish the strong. He discovered something that will either liberate you or enrage you. Most of what you've been taught to call morality isn't actually about making the world better. It's about making powerful people smaller. What almost nobody understands is that Nietzsche didn't reject morality because he was evil or nihilistic. He rejected conventional morality because he saw through its actual function. He observed that the moral systems dominating Western culture weren't created by strong people to guide their strength toward good ends. They were created by weak, resentful people, specifically to constrain and control those with genuine power. And the most insidious part is that these systems convince strong people to internalize their own suppression, to see their strength as vice rather than virtue, to voluntarily diminish themselves in the name of being good. Today I'm going to reveal exactly what Nietzsche meant when he said that morality exists to control the strong. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the guilt you feel about your ambition isn't conscience but conditioning, why the voice telling you to be humble is often the voice of resentment, and most importantly, how to distinguish between genuine ethics that channels strength toward creation and slave morality that exists only to diminish power. But I need you to know, what I'm about to share will challenge everything you've been taught about goodness and virtue. Nietzsche's most dangerous insight wasn't about God or the Overman. It was his genealogical investigation into where moral values actually come from. And on the genealogy of morals, he traced the historical development of Western morality and discovered something shocking. Our current moral framework didn't emerge from wise people contemplating the good. It emerged from weak, powerless people who needed a weapon against the strong. He called this slave morality, and understanding it will completely transform how you interpret the moral demands placed on you. Consider the historical situation Nietzsche examined. There were people with power, strength, vitality, the capacity to create and build and express themselves fully. And there were people without power who lacked the strength or opportunity or capacity to live fully, to create, to express their authentic nature. The strong lived according to what Nietzsche called master morality. They valued strength, courage, creativity, excellence, the full expression of life. They saw their power as good, their capacity is virtue. This wasn't cruel or oppressive in itself. It was simply the morality of people who were alive and wanted to celebrate aliveness. But the weak, the powerless, those who lacked the capacity to live fully, they experienced the strength of others as oppression. They couldn't compete with the strong on the strong's terms, couldn't match their vitality or creativity or power. So they did something ingenious and insidious. They created a new moral system, a complete inversion of values, where all the qualities of the strong became vices, and all the qualities of the weak became virtues. Strength became cruelty. Ambition became selfishness. Pride became sin. Excellence became arrogance. And conversely, weakness became humility. Powerlessness became meekness. Inability to create became selfless service. Lack of ambition became contentment. This wasn't honest, moral reasoning. This was what Nietzsche called ressentiment, a French word meaning a deep, festering resentment that can't express itself directly. The weak couldn't defeat the strong through strength, so they defeated them through morality. They convinced society that strength itself is immoral, that power needs to be constrained, that anyone who expresses their full capacity is selfish and dangerous. And over centuries, this slave morality became so dominant, so internalized, that even strong people began to believe it. Even people with genuine capacity for greatness began to see their own strength as something suspect, something that needs to be diminished and controlled. Think about the moral language you use when you judge yourself. When you're about to do something ambitious, something that would require you to operate at full power, what do you tell yourself? You say, that's selfish, that's arrogant, that's self-centered. You're being too much. You need to be more humble. You should think about others instead of yourself. And notice what these judgments do. They don't make you more ethical. They make you smaller. They don't guide your strength toward better ends. They suppress your strength entirely. This is slave morality functioning exactly as designed. It's making you afraid of your own power by convincing you that power itself is immoral. Now understand what this means for every moral demand that's ever been placed on you. When someone tells you to be more humble, to tone yourself down, to not shine so bright, to remember that pride is a sin, they're not guiding you toward genuine goodness. They're trying to control your power because your power threatens them. When society tells you that ambition is selfish, that pursuing excellence is arrogant, that wanting to express your full capacity means you're self-centered, it's not protecting others from you. It's protecting mediocrity from excellence, weakness from strength, comfortable stagnation from the disruption that genuine power creates. But here's where Nietzsche's observation becomes truly devastating. The most effective form of control isn't external suppression. It's getting you to suppress yourself, to internalize slave morality so deeply that you police your own power, feel guilty for your own strength, voluntarily make yourself small. And this is exactly what's happened. You don't need anyone to stop you from pursuing greatness. You stop yourself. You don't need anyone to diminish your power. You diminish it automatically the moment you feel it rising. You've become your own jailer, using moral language to keep yourself imprisoned. Nietzsche identified 3 types of people in relation to this dynamic of power and morality. Understanding which type you are will determine whether you spend your life suppressing your strength or finally expressing it. Type 1 is what Nietzsche called the slave, the person who has no power and uses morality as a weapon against those who do. The slave isn't physically enslaved, they're psychologically powerless. They lack the capacity or courage or opportunity to create, to build, to express their authentic nature at full intensity. And because they can't compete with powerful people on the basis of actual capacity, they compete on the basis of morality. They make their weakness into virtue and others' strength into vice. The slave finds power in claiming moral superiority, in being the one who's humble while others are arrogant, selfless while others are selfish, meek while others are proud. You recognize slaves immediately. They're the people who are always calling out others for being too ambitious, too confident, too successful. They speak constantly about humility and selflessness, but what they actually mean is, you should be as powerless as I am. They praise equality, but what they want is for everyone to be equally diminished. They criticize anyone who shines too bright, who achieves too much, who operates at too high a level. And they frame all of this in moral language, as if they're defending ethics when actually they're defending their resentment. The slave needs you to be weak because your strength is a constant reminder of their powerlessness. The dangerous thing about slaves isn't that they're openly hostile to strength. It's that they've convinced society that their resentment is righteousness, that their demand for others' diminishment is ethical concern, that their attack on power is moral duty. So when a slave tells you you're being selfish for pursuing your ambition, when they criticize your confidence as arrogance, when they shame your excellence as showing off, society backs them up. Because slave morality has become the dominant morality, and anyone expressing authentic power gets labeled as the immoral one. Type 2 is what Nietzsche called the guilty strong, the person who has genuine power but has internalized slave morality so deeply that they see their own strength as sin. The guilty strong is you. You have capacity, talent, ambition, strength. You could operate at a much higher level than you currently do. You could create more, achieve more, express more, but you don't, because you've learned to feel guilty about your power. Every time you feel your strength rising, slave morality activates in your mind. You think, I'm being selfish, I'm being arrogant, I should be more humble. Who am I to think I'm special? And so you suppress yourself, you make yourself small, you apologize for your capacity. The guilty, strong experiences constant internal conflict. Part of them wants to express their full power, to pursue their ambitious visions, to operate without apology at their actual capacity. But another part, the internalized slave morality, immediately attacks any expression of strength as immoral. So they live in perpetual self-suppression, perpetual self-attack, perpetually making themselves smaller than they actually are. And they call this being good, being humble, being ethical, but what they're actually doing is participating in their own diminishment. They become the enforcers of their own imprisonment. Here's what makes the guilty strong's position so tragic. They have the power to create genuine value in the world, to contribute something that only they can contribute, to express something that needs their specific strength to exist. But they're spending all their energy suppressing that power, feeling guilty about that capacity, making themselves acceptable to people who are threatened by excellence. They're voluntarily weakening themselves in the name of virtue. And in doing so, they're depriving the world of exactly what they could uniquely offer. Type 3 is what Nietzsche called the free spirit or the overman. The person who has power and has seen through slave morality, who understands that genuine ethics isn't about suppressing strength, but about channeling strength toward creation. The free spirit has recognized that the voice telling them to be humble isn't conscience, it's internalized resentment. That the guilt they feel about their ambition isn't moral sensitivity, it's conditioning. That the demand to make themselves small isn't coming from genuine ethics, but from people who are threatened by power. But here's what's critical. The free spirit doesn't become cruel or tyrannical. They don't use their rejection of slave morality as license to harm others. What they reject is the idea that strength itself is immoral, that ambition is selfish, that excellence is arrogance, that expressing full capacity is wrong. They develop what Nietzsche called the morality beyond good and evil, which doesn't mean no morality, but means morality that isn't based on weakness and resentment. They create, they build, they express their authentic power without apology. And they do this not to dominate others, but because they understand that unexpressed power is wasted potential, that suppressed strength serves no one, that the world needs what only unleashed capacity can create. If you're experiencing guilt about your strength, if you recognize yourself as someone who suppresses their power in the name of being good, you need to understand the specific mechanisms that keep you locked in voluntary diminishment. These aren't external constraints. They're sophisticated psychological systems that convince you to participate in your own suppression. Danger 1. Confusing humility with self-diminishment. You've been taught that humility is a virtue and it can be, but you need to understand what true humility actually is versus what slave morality calls humility. True humility is accurate self-assessment. It's knowing your strengths and weaknesses without exaggeration in either direction. It's being able to acknowledge what you're genuinely good at without arrogance and what you're not good at without shame. But slave morality defines humility as making yourself smaller than you are, pretending you're less capable than you are, apologizing for your excellence, hiding your light. This isn't humility, this is self-betrayal. And every time you engage in it, you're not being virtuous. You're participating in the suppression of your authentic power. Danger 2. Believing that strength without guilt is narcissism. You've internalized the message that anyone who expresses confidence without constant self-doubt, who pursues ambition without apologizing, who owns their excellence without disclaimers, must be a narcissist. This is slave morality's most effective weapon. It makes healthy self-regard seem like pathology. It makes authentic confidence seem like arrogance. It makes the full expression of capacity seem like selfishness. But Nietzsche understood that genuine narcissism isn't about strength. It's about weakness that needs constant external validation. The truly strong don't need to prove anything. They simply express what they are. And the fact that this expression threatens people who are invested in universal diminishment doesn't make it narcissistic. It makes it authentic. Danger 3. Using altruism as an excuse to avoid your own development. You tell yourself you can't pursue your ambitious projects, can't focus on your growth, can't develop your capacities because that would be selfish when there are people suffering. This sounds noble. But Nietzsche saw that this is often just sophisticated weakness. Because what do you actually offer the world by remaining underdeveloped? What good do you create by suppressing your potential? The person who develops their full capacity creates far more value than the person who keeps himself small out of false altruism. But developing your capacity requires focus, effort, resources directed toward yourself. Enslaved morality has convinced you that any investment in your own development is selfish, even when that development would enable you to contribute more. Danger for seeking permission from the resentful before expressing power, before you pursue something ambitious, before you express your full capacity, before you let yourself shine. You look around for approval. You check whether others will be comfortable with your strength. You make sure you won't threaten anyone, won't make anyone feel inadequate, won't disrupt the comfortable mediocrity. And if you sense any disapproval, any subtle criticism, any hint that your power makes others uncomfortable, you pull back. But here's what Nietzsche would say. The people who are threatened by your strength are exactly the people whose permission you should never seek. Their disapproval isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're doing something powerful. So how do you break free from slave morality and develop authentic ethics that channel strength toward creation instead of suppressing strength entirely? How do you distinguish between genuine conscience and internalized resentment? Nietzsche mapped this path with brutal honesty. And it requires destroying your relationship to conventional morality in order to build something authentic. The first phase is recognizing slave morality when it speaks. You develop the ability to distinguish between genuine ethical concerns and resentment disguised as morality. When you feel guilty about pursuing your ambition, you ask, is this guilt because I'm actually going to harm someone? Or is this guilt because I've been taught that strength itself is suspect? When someone criticizes your confidence as arrogance, you ask, are they offering genuine feedback about my behavior, or are they threatened by my power and using moral language to control me? When you feel you should be more humble, you ask, am I actually being grandiose and inaccurate, or am I being authentically powerful, and that power makes others uncomfortable? This requires brutal honesty because you'll discover that much of what you've called conscience is actually just internalized slave morality. Voices of resentment that you've adopted as your own. The voice telling you to stay small isn't your ethical center. It's the accumulated demands of people who were threatened by excellence, who needed you to be weak so they could feel adequate, who use morality as a weapon to keep power in check. The second phase is what Nietzsche called the transvaluation of values. You examine every moral belief you hold and ask, does this value actually guide strength toward good ends, or does it simply suppress strength entirely? You discover that many values you thought were universal ethics are actually just tools for controlling power. Humility as defined by slave morality doesn't make you better. It makes you smaller. Selflessness as conventionally understood doesn't serve others. It just prevents you from serving anyone effectively because you're too depleted. Meekness doesn't create peace. It creates a world where power goes underground and expresses itself through passive aggression and resentment. You begin to develop new values, what Nietzsche called life-affirming values. Instead of humility, that means making yourself small. You value accurate self-knowledge. Instead of selflessness, that means self-destruction. You value sustainability, where you develop yourself so fully that you have genuine overflow to offer others. Instead of meekness, you value courage to express your authentic nature. Instead of equality, that means universal diminishment, you value excellence that calls everyone toward their highest potential. The third phase is acting from strength without apology. You stop seeking permission before expressing your power. You stop checking whether your excellence makes others uncomfortable. You stop making yourself small to ease others' insecurity. You pursue your ambitious visions. You express your authentic capacity. You operate at your actual level without disclaimer or apology. And when people respond with criticism, when they call you selfish or arrogant or too much, you recognize it for what it is, not ethical concern, but resentment of your power. And you continue anyway, not because you don't care about ethics, but because you understand that unexpressed power serves no one. The fourth phase is using your strength to create rather than dominate. This is the crucial distinction that Nietzsche's critics miss. Rejecting slave morality doesn't mean becoming tyrannical. It means channeling your power toward creation, toward building, toward expressing something that couldn't exist without your specific capacity. The free spirit doesn't use their freedom from guilt to harm others. They use it to create value, to contribute uniquely, to bring something into the world that requires unleashed power to exist. They understand that their strength isn't just for themselves. It's their contribution, their gift, their responsibility, but they can only offer it if they stop suppressing it in the name of false virtue. The fifth phase is what Nietzsche called becoming who you are. You accept that you have power, that this power is not a vice, but your authentic nature, that expressing it fully is not selfish, but necessary. You stop trying to be the humble, selfless, diminished person that slave morality demands. You become the powerful, creative, fully expressed person that you actually are. And you make peace with the fact that some people will hate this, will criticize you, will call you arrogant and selfish. Because those are the people who need you to be weak, and their comfort is not worth your suppression. Remember that guilt you feel every time your power starts to rise? That voice that tells you to make yourself smaller, to be more humble, to stop being so ambitious? That's not your conscience. That's slave morality, internalized resentment, the accumulated voices of people who were threatened by excellence and needed you to be diminished. You've been carrying their resentment as if it were virtue, suppressing your strength as if it were ethics, participating in your own imprisonment while calling it goodness. But you have power, real power, the capacity to create, to build, to contribute something that only your specific strength can produce. And every day you suppress that power, every moment you make yourself smaller, every choice you make from guilt rather than authentic capacity, you're not being good. You're wasting potential. You're depriving the world of exactly what you could uniquely offer. You're participating in the diminishment that slave morality exists to create. Nietzsche warned that morality exists to control the strong because he saw clearly what most people deny. That moral language is often just resentment dressed up as righteousness. That demands for humility are often just demands for suppression. That criticism of confidence is often just fear of power. And he saw that strong people, good people, capable people, they voluntarily diminish themselves because they've been convinced that their strength is the problem, when actually the suppression of their strength is the problem. Stop for a second and ask yourself honestly, how much of your life have you spent making yourself smaller because you were told that's what good people do? How many ambitious visions have you abandoned because pursuing them would seem selfish? How many times have you suppressed your authentic power because someone's resentment convinced you that your strength was wrong? If this resonates, comment, "My strength is not my sin." Your words will reach someone else right now who's suffocating under the weight of false virtue, who's been trained to see their power as vice, who desperately needs permission to finally stop suppressing themselves. Subscribe to the channel for insights that challenge everything you've been taught about morality and power. Every week, I bring you Nietzsche's most dangerous truths about what genuine ethics actually look like versus what slave morality demands. This isn't comfortable philosophy. This is liberation for people who are ready to stop participating in their own diminishment. If you're ready to understand how to channel strength toward creation without guilt, check out my video on Nietzsche's concept of the will to power, where I reveal exactly how to distinguish between authentic ethics and internalized resentment. The path from guilty suppression to authentic expression starts with recognizing that your power is not your problem. Your fear of your power is morality exists to control the strong, and you've been controlled by it long enough. You've suppressed your strength, diminished your power, made yourself small, all in the name of being good. But what good have you actually created through your suppression? What value have you offered by remaining underdeveloped? What contribution have you made by hiding your light? The world doesn't need your diminishment. It needs your full, expressed, authentic, powerful self. And the day you stop apologizing for your strength is the day you finally start creating what only you can create. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.